They say apartments are safer than houses. Too many eyes, too many doors, too many people around for anything truly bad to happen. That's what I thought when I moved into my building 6 months ago. Cheap rent, friendly neighbors, thin walls that let me hear laughter through the ceiling. But the man across the hall wasn't like the others. He never smiled. Never said hello. He only watched. And once I noticed, I couldn't unsee him. This is the story of how I learned. Sometimes danger doesn't knock on your door. Sometimes it already has the keys. The first time I saw him was in the hallway. I was struggling with groceries and he just stood there. Tall, pale, eyes too wide like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't offer to help, didn't even move aside. Just stared while I fumbled with my keys. I laughed nervously, said good evening, and shut my door quickly. For a while I forgot about him. The walls were thin, and I could hear him moving at night. Slow footsteps at 2 or 3 a.m., pacing. Sometimes a dragging sound, like furniture across the floor. One night, while taking out the trash, I caught him peeking through the crack of his door. He didn't blink when I saw him. Just closed it, slow, deliberate. That's when the small things started. My doormat would be turned around. My lock looked scratched, like someone had tested it. And once, taped to my door, I found a single Polaroid picture. A photo of my own door, taken from just a few feet away. I told myself it was a prank. But my stomach didn't believe me. The next week I woke up at 3:14 a.m. to a sound, tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. It wasn't coming from my door. It was my window. 5th floor. I crept forward and pulled the curtain back just an inch. Across the courtyard, in his own apartment, his light was off. But I could see him, standing at his window, facing mine, and his hand was tapping the glass. Slow, deliberate, like he wanted me to know he was there. I dropped to the floor, hard hammering, crawled back to bed and hid under the covers like a child. The next day, I went to the landlord. "He's harassing me," I said. The landlord shook his head. "He's weird but harmless. Been here for years. Pays on time." That night, I locked every bolt, shoved a chair under the handle and tried to sleep. But at 2:50 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text, just an image. It was me, asleep in bed. I screamed, dropped the phone, tore through my apartment. The windows were locked. The door was locked. No one inside. But the photo, it was taken from the corner of my own room. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I was shaking, hollow-eyed, and desperate. I called the police. They knocked on his door. He opened calmly, shirt buttoned, hair combed. They searched. Nothing. No camera, no photos, no evidence. They left me with a warning. "Don't waste our time unless you're sure." But I was sure. Every nerve in my body screamed it. That weekend, I stayed at a friend's, but when I returned, I noticed something off. My chair, still pressed under the door handle, was moved. My rug was flipped, and on my pillow lay another Polaroid. Me. Smiling in my sleep, I ran to the hallway, pounded on his door. No answer. The neighbor from 2 doors down peeked out. "He moved out yesterday," she whispered. "Moved out?" No, he hadn't. I shoved open the stairwell door and saw it, muddy boot prints leading down, not out, into the basement. I shouldn't have followed, but terror makes you reckless. The basement smelled of mold, the lights buzzing faint. I walked past rows of storage units until I found one with the lock broken. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, labeled with names, women's names. Some I didn't recognize, inside each box, Polaroids. Hundreds of them. Women sleeping, cooking, walking, brushing their teeth, and in the center, my box. Already half full, I stumbled back, nearly screamed when I heard it. Footsteps, behind me. I turned. He stood at the door, smiling, holding another Polaroid camera in his hand. "You were my favorite," he whispered. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember swinging the crowbar I grabbed from the floor. But I remember the sound it made when it connected. And I remember running, tripping, bursting into the night until someone pulled me into safety. The police raided the basement. They took him away in cuffs. He didn't fight. Didn't say a word. They said he'd been living there for years. Watching tenants come and go. Collecting them, I moved out the next morning. But every window I pass still feels like an eye. Every tap on the glass makes my chest freeze, because I know now. Monsters don't just live under beds or in nightmares. Sometimes they live across the hall. Sometimes they already have your picture. They say curiosity killed the cat. For me, curiosity nearly killed something worse. My sense of safety. I always thought basements were just for storage. Boxes, old furniture, maybe a spider colony or two. But in my neighbor's house, the basement was alive with something else. Something that was never meant to be seen. And once I saw it, once I stepped down those creaking wooden stairs, there was no going back. It started with noises. I had lived next door to Mr. Avery for 6 months. He was an older man, quiet, the type who waved but never invited conversation. His lawn was always trimmed, his curtains always closed. But every night around midnight I'd hear it, a faint humming sound. Low, steady, mechanical. At first I thought it was a generator. But then came the other noises, scraping, dragging, a muffled voice. One night I went outside to bring in the trash and noticed his basement window, just a sliver at ground level, was glowing faint yellow. Something moved past it. Something human-shaped. I froze. Because Mr. Avery lived alone. The next morning, I asked him casually at the mailbox if he was renovating. His eyes flicked up sharply. "Don't ask questions," he muttered. And just like that, he turned away. It was the way he said it. Not joking, not tired, warning. From that day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The sounds grew louder. Sometimes I swore I heard crying. A woman's voice, faint but unmistakable. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, insomnia, too many late-night horror podcasts. But one night, I leaned closer to the basement window, and I heard it. Clear as day. "Help me!" I stumbled back, heart racing. I called the police. They came, shined flashlights, knocked on his door. Mr. Avery answered in his robe, calm as ever. They checked the basement, or so they said, and found nothing. No signs of foul play, they told me. But as soon as they left, I watched from my own window. Mr. Avery walked to the basement door, locked it with 3 separate bolts, and stood there for a long time. Staring at my house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that voice. Finally, at 2 a.m., I made a decision I regret to this day. I took a flashlight, slipped outside, and tried his basement door. It was unlocked. The air inside was damp, heavy, and smelled of mold. My flashlight beam danced across unfinished walls, stacked boxes, and something else. Chains bolted into the concrete. My throat tightened, and then I heard it again. A whisper. "Please." I followed the sound to the far corner. A wooden partition, like a crude wall, stood there. Behind it, a figure huddled in the shadows. A woman. Thin, pale, eyes wide like she hadn't seen daylight in years. Before I could speak, before I could move, a voice boomed behind me. "What are you doing in my house?" "Mr. Avery." He held something in his hand, a hammer. His face was red, veins bulging. "You don't belong here," he snarled. I raised my hands, stammering, trying to explain. But the woman screamed, loud, desperate. It was enough. The neighbors woke. Lights flicked on. Doors opened. Mr. Avery froze, realizing too many eyes were on him now. He dropped the hammer. He ran up the stairs, and for the first time the woman stepped into the light. The police came back. This time they didn't shrug. They found the truth in that basement, years of it. Evidence, belongings, chains that weren't just for storage. The woman had been missing for months. She wasn't the first. Mr. Avery was arrested, silent, eyes burning holes into me as they led him away. I moved a month later, but I still hear it sometimes. When the house is quiet, when I let my mind wander, that faint humming, that muffled voice. Because the worst part isn't what I saw in his basement. The worst part is knowing there are other basements, other doors, other neighbors who wave politely while hiding monsters beneath their homes. People say apartment buildings keep you safe. Too many eyes, too much noise, too many witnesses for anything truly terrible to happen. That's what I believed when I signed the lease for Unit 4C. The elevator smelled like old coffee. The hallway lights flickered, and the super swore the place was quiet after 10. I needed quiet. I needed a reset. Above me was Unit 5C. The super told me it was empty, under renovation, no tenant for months. "You'll barely hear a thing," he promised, jangling the ring of keys that could open any life in the building. He was wrong. The first night I moved in. I heard footsteps pacing directly above me, slow, careful, heel. Heel. Dimmeldur in a pattern that felt like counting down. I went to sleep, telling myself pipes knock and old wood settles. But wood doesn't pause at your ceiling and breathe. This is what happened in the apartment upstairs, the empty one. Moving is the kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones. I stacked boxes against the living room wall and left a trail of packing paper from the door to the kitchen like a breadcrumb map only I could read. I ate cold noodles out of a carton and fell asleep on the couch with my shoes on, a soft victory. At 2:17 a.m., something woke me. Not a bang, not a scream, a soft, steady creak above the ceiling like someone walking in slow ovals. I checked my phone. I listened. The sound changed direction, paused over the bedroom, then came back to the living room as if the walker had reconsidered their route. Renovation, I whispered. Or raccoons. I laughed because the laugh needed somewhere to go. Morning washed the ceiling into ordinary plaster. I made coffee and told myself to be normal. On my way out, I asked Mrs. Tate from 4B, white hair, floral housecoat, a cane she didn't seem to need, if anyone lived above me. See? She squinted. No dear. That one's been empty since the flood. The floorboards are all ripped up, dangerous. She leaned closer, perfume like powder. Why do you ask? No reason, I lied. Just heard something. That afternoon, I stopped the super in the lobby. You said 5C is vacant? Yep. He flipped through a clipboard. Gutted last year. No electric on at night. Crews only come daytime. Why? I heard footsteps. He half smiled. Welcome to old buildings. That night, the footsteps started earlier, just after midnight. I tried recording them on my phone, but the playback captured only the low hum of the fridge. Around 1:30 a.m., something new. A dragging sound, like a chair pulled very slowly across wood. Then a soft tap, tap, tap 3 times directly over my bed. I stared up and tapped back once because sometimes fear is stupid. Silence answered. Then 2 taps, closer to the window. The kind of conversation that doesn't need words. On the 3rd night, I brought a flashlight and went upstairs. The hallway on 5 smelled like dust and old rain. A strip of painter's tape hung like a tired tongue from the door of 5C. A city notice was stapled crooked above the knob. Condemned, no entry. Someone had drawn a smiley face in pen over the OI, pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. When I clicked the flashlight, a light bled under the frame and showed the dust. 1 set of footprints, fresh. They led from the elevator to 5C and stopped at the door. No exit prints. A chill crawled my back like a small, deliberate hand. I went downstairs without running because I didn't want to sound like prey. I started noticing a timetable. The sounds always began between 12:45 and 1 a.m. The pacing lasted 20 minutes. Then the dragging. Then the taps, always 3. On Thursday, the taps came at my living room ceiling instead of the bedroom. On Friday, they followed me. I'd walk from the couch to the kitchen for water and the steps above would track me. 1 room behind, as if whoever was up there was learning the lines I walked. I told myself to be proactive. The next morning, I asked the super again. Can you open 5C? Just to prove to me it's empty. He sighed, dramatic, but took the elevator with me. On 5, he fit a master key into the lock and grunted. Stiff, he said. The door stuck like it didn't want to be remembered. When it opened, the smell hit first, wet wood and thyme. The apartment was a skeleton. Studs where walls should be, floors stripped to subfloor. A single bare bulb hanging dead from a wire. Dust everywhere except for a rectangle in the living room. Clear space, swept clean. In the middle of that rectangle, a wooden chair. It was ordinary, battered, 1 leg capped with a cardboard shim. The super scratched his head. Didn't think any furniture was left. No electricity at night, right? I said, fighting the urge to whisper. He shook his head. Breakers off. And the deadbolt was locked from the outside. You saw me unlock it. He flicked the light switch on the wall. Nothing. I walked to the chair, crossed my arms to keep from touching it, and listened. The building held its breath. No pacing, no taps. The quiet felt staged. On the chair seat lay something this place shouldn't have, a Polaroid photo. I knew what it would be before I picked it up. The picture showed my living room below, A high angle, from directly above. Me asleep on my couch 2 nights ago. Mouth open. Blanket twisted, lamps on. The date printed white along the border, 0412. My voice went somewhere small. This is a joke. You're messing with me. The super looked honestly offended. Lady, I don't even know where you live. You do, I said. You have master keys. Not to your camera, he shot back, then flinched like he'd said too much. He left the photo where it sat and backed toward the door. We're done here. I'll change the padlock. He didn't. That night, right on schedule, the footsteps returned, heavier, slower, followed by the dragging. When the taps came, they moved from one end of my ceiling to the other, a line of 3 beats traveling like measurements. I lay on my back and listened to whoever lived in an empty apartment map my life. At 2:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go dark, then lit it and opened the message. A photo. Not a Polaroid. A phone shot this time, grainy, close. My bedroom, taken from above. Me lying stiff, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I hadn't taken it. I hadn't gotten out of bed. I called the police. 2 officers came at 3 a.m., their radios whispering. They walked upstairs, found the condemned sign, peeked through the door gap. No one inside, they said, despite not unlocking it. They took my statement with patient faces and automatic pens. Probably old pipes, the older one offered. Sound travels in buildings like this. Pipes don't take pictures, I said. He didn't have an answer for that, after they left. I pulled my mattress into the living room to avoid sleeping directly under 5C's bedroom. At 3:33 a.m., the taps moved to the living room too. I stopped sleeping altogether. The next morning, Mrs. Tate pressed a folded paper into my hand in the mailroom. You should know, she said softly, before you hear it from someone else. The clipping was from a local paper, 8 months old. Eviction turns tragic in Midtown walk-up. I skimmed. Tenant in 5C, young woman. Dispute over repairs and mold. She'd chained herself to a chair in protest when the city condemned the unit after a burst pipe. Refused to vacate, the article said. Found deceased after 3 days from exposure and dehydration. There was a photo, black and white, of a chair in a room that looked like an X-ray. The caption mentioned the chair had been removed during cleanup. The chair I had seen today. I didn't want to scare you, Mrs. Tate whispered. But you should be careful at night. Ghost story? I tried to joke. It died in my throat. Mrs. Tate squeezed my wrist. Not every ghost is dead. I decided to leave. I stuffed clothes into a bag, grabbed my laptop, my passport, the precious small things you can carry when your life needs to fit in one trip down an elevator. At 11:58 p.m., the power went out. The apartment exhaled as the fridge died and the fans stilled. Hallway lights blinked once, then darkness pressed in like a hand over a mouth. My phone flashlight sliced a cone through dust. I reached for the doorknob and froze. Footsteps above. Not pacing, running, back and forth, pounding, then dragging. The sound of metal against wood, chain across floor. It skittered, caught, skittered again. 3 taps, hard enough to shed plaster dust onto my face. Stop, I whispered to the ceiling. Please! I'm leaving, the taps answered, closer to the door like no more anger can be braver than fear. I grabbed the flashlight and the small hammer I kept under the sink and went upstairs. The corridor on 5 felt like a throat. The condemned sign rippled in the breeze of the stairwell as if breathing. I set the beam on the lock. New padlock, cheap. It took 3 hits to crack it. The chain fell and the door swung inward. Cold. The chair sat where I'd left it, centered on that clear patch of floor, facing a wall of studs and aged brick. The air smelled wrong. Stale water, old paper, a faint sweet rot like flowers 3 days dead. Hello? I called, hating the way my voice lifted on the second syllable. Something scraped in the far corner. My light caught the outline of a chain bolted to a joist. The end of the chain was empty, but the floorboards around it were rubbed shiny in a circle from something, or someone, spinning that chain day after day. I edged farther in. The door side shut behind me. My flashlight beam shook as the ceiling above me answered with 3 soft taps, except there was nothing above. I was on the top floor, 5C's ceiling the building's roof. I didn't breathe for 3 whole seconds. Then I moved the light to the chair. Another Polaroid lay face down on the seat. I flipped it with the hammer's claw. It was today. My hallway. My hand pressing the elevator button, my bag on my shoulder. Taken from directly above, I didn't hear the door lock. I heard the chain catch, metal-kissed wood. The chain that had been bolted to the joist, now looped around the doorknob outside, pulled tight. Something on the far side of the wall yanked, slow and steady, until the doorknob groaned and the latch ceded home. Trapped. Who's there? I yelled. Stop! 3 taps on the inside of the door this time. The chair scraped an inch toward me without anyone touching it. I swung the hammer wildly at the chain bolt. The head bounced, sending shock up my arm. I hit again. The bolt bent. The chain loosened. In the last strike, the bolt tore free and I fell backwards. The door creaked open an inch, then 2. Cold hallway air slid around my ankles like relief. A hand appeared in the gap, small, pale, fingernails torn down to the quick. It pressed the door shut again, gently, like tucking in a child. Then 3 taps on the other side. Softer. Sadder. I yanked the door open with something close to a scream. Swung the hammer at empty space and ran. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs 3 at a time, the beam of my phone light bouncing like a heartbeat. Down in the lobby, the power stuttered back. The lights blinked to life, humming. I turned in a slow circle. Everything looked the same as always. A plant with too few leaves. A bulletin board with too many flyers. The super behind the desk, mouth open as I burst in with a hammer in my hand. 5C, I gasped. Someone's in 5C. He stared at the hammer. He stared at my face. He stood up slowly. No one, he said. No one is in 5C. Then who locked me in? He didn't answer. He picked up the phone. The police came with a battering ram this time. They found the door splintered where I'd cracked the padlock, the chain bolt torn out of the joist. The chair in the center of the room facing the studs. No footprints but mine. They found Polaroids in a shoebox that hadn't been there earlier. Not just of me. Tenants from years ago! People sleeping on couches that didn't exist anymore, standing at windows long since replaced. Black and white faces in a building that kept forgetting them. They found the chain. They bagged it like a weapon. They took my statement with careful voices and wrote subject appears credible. Hysterical on a report I accidentally glimpsed when the younger officer flipped a page too fast. Mrs. Tate brought me tea in a chipped mug while they worked. She was my friend, she said, eyes rimmed red. The girl from 5C, she fought so hard to be heard. They called her difficult. They always call us that when we don't agree to drown quietly. I asked what her name had been. She told me. I said it back. The building felt different when the name sat in the air, like the hallway finally had a spine. I moved out a week later. The super didn't charge me a fee. He didn't meet my eyes either. I rented a studio across town with a view of a brick wall and a roofline too low for footsteps. On my first night there, I stood beneath the new ceiling and listened for taps. None came. The quiet didn't feel safe yet. It felt like a trick, waiting for the cymbal crash. Some habits remain. I check the corners of my ceiling before bed. I keep a hammer by the door. When the elevator dings, I step aside and look up just for a second, because once you've learned that above you is a place someone can live, you never truly forget to check. Sometimes I take the Polaroid I kept, the one from the chair, dated 4/12, and look at the white border. I write her name there in neat letters and slide the photo back into the drawer. I don't know if names help the dead, but they help the living remember what the living need to do. Because the worst part isn't the footsteps or the taps or the chair that moves when no one's touching it. The worst part is how easy it is for an empty apartment to stay full of a story no one wants to hear. So I'm telling you now, if you live under a place the world insists is empty, listen anyway. If something maps your movements from above, move differently. If a door closes gently like a hand putting you to sleep, run. And if you ever hear 3 taps, space just so, don't tap back.